to our third panel for We Are But Your Children, the oral history of the nightclub ManRay, and our look at ManRay's history over 20 years. And um, yeah, these panels are great. I feel like they're a great window into a time that, you know, as we were just discussing before, you know, sort of a you're not sort of clocking it as it happens, but you can look back on it and realize like wow, like those were like 100-mile-per-hour days and lots of fun. And what I want to do is take this one in particular and look at the years 1987 to 1991, which I will argue are very important, transformative, and fun years in regards to creating what Man Ray becomes. Over its entire 20-year history. Our last chronological one, we looked at the beginnings, sort of 83 to 86, but now we're going to look at sort of Man Ray as it's sort of running down the track and sort of still finding what it was or what it wants to be and the stories behind it. So what I'd like to do is offer an invitation first to say hello to our panelists. Our panelists are really obviously the lifeblood of this. So I'll start in no particular order. Chris Ewan. Chris was a resident DJ at Man Ray from 1986 until it closed in 2005. Since then, Chris has been DJing the club nights Heroes and Ex Mortis, as well as the seasonal Electric Dreams Tea Dance at Provincetown's Boat Slip Resort. During this pandemic, which hopefully is now coming to an end, fingers crossed, Heroes and Ex Mortis have become live streaming events on Fridays. And we are just in the process, I would imagine, of going into live shows, and we're going to knock on wood for that. And Chris continues to write music and record and tour with the bands Future Bible Heroes and the Magnetic Fields. So welcome, Chris. Terry Nidzwicki, aka Terry, also our beloved bar witch of Man Ray, Ground Zero. Terry is a lover of the Holy Trilogy, which is Sisters, Susie, and Peter. Terry dislikes zucchini, and you can find Terry on the Twitch live streams as Bar Witch One. And I will say, on a personal level, Terry shaped my sort of beverage path in ways I can't even begin to quantify. So I would say myself and others owe Terry the deepest debt of gratitude. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, sir.
Eve Costarelli was a go-go dancer at Man Ray between the years of 1987 and 1991. Eve has danced all over Boston as a tap dancer and flamenco dancer and remains passionate about bringing the joy of movement to all bodies. Eve's interactive mindful movement program called Always Be Dancing, Move with Eve, is a fun, upbeat, and wholly inclusive experience. You can find her on social media at Always Be Dancing. And I will say that, Eve, you set the tone for all of us who literally stepped on the dance floor and basically let the music take us where to go. So I'm so happy to have you here. And last but certainly not least is Dwayne Bruce. Dwayne was a WFNX DJ and a WBCN DJ. He is the author of the book Hang the DJ, which I have read and love and recommend fully and highly, especially if you love Boston, Massachusetts history. It's really great.
I wasn't aware. I have to get one.
Dwayne currently has the movie script of the book going around the Hollywood circles. And excuse me, we hope that actually becomes something that we can all look at as well as listen to. Dwayne is also the lead character of Santa in the futuristic animated feature Infinite Santa 8000. And he is the current host of a weekly roadshow podcast called American Debauchery. You can hear American Debauchery on SoundCloud and Audible. Thank you all for being here. I would like to also introduce my co-hosts, Sam Levitt and Ted Rassicott, who are also my co-editors on the project. Sam and Ted, thank you for being here. And I will say this to everyone. If you have a question for our panelists, please put it in the chat and we will definitely have time to
Froze.
get to this time period.
What happens
I know
when
it's
admin freezes?
You
froze on us, Sean.
I did. Okay,
Yeah.
hold on. Can you hear me?
Hey,
I can, yeah.
All right, give me 1 second. Hold on.
there you are.
Can you? All right,
You're moving.
I'm moving. All right, so everyone can hear me. Excellent. Okay, so I want to start my first question for the panelists, and I'll have you all answer in the order that I introduced you. This is a general question, so I'm going to age myself by asking this question, but I want you all to sort of pretend that it's an episode of Quantum Leap, and you are all your individual Sam Beckett's, and you are going back to the year 1987. And I'd like for each of you, to the best of your ability, to give me sort of who you were in 1987. Where were you? What were you doing? Was Man Ray a part of your life? Sort of just give me a general idea of, if you were to leap into your life at 1987, what's going on. So we'll start with you, Chris.
Oh God. I actually, Man Ray was in my life by that point. I was working there on Sundays. And I think, at least by 87 or something like that, I was expanding into maybe 1 or 2 other nights. Like I do some fill-in things on Wednesdays for Jared Hoffman or for Linda or things like that. So, and besides that, I was in my band, which is what I'd moved to Boston to do in late 85. So I was involved with Figures on a Beach, and we were, I think by that point, we might have just signed with Sire. So my life was very music centric, and I was very poor. And I used to hang out at the clubs a lot, including Man Ray.
Excellent. Terry, 1987.
Was I at Ground Zero?
No, that was 89, I think.
89 Ground Zero.
I don't know. I was probably a driver.
Oh, you're cutting out, Terry.
You're cutting out, Terry.
We
Sorry.
can't hear you.
Still can't hear you, Terry.
You might have muted yourself accidentally.
Did I freeze again?
Nope, you're
Oh,
good
we
now.
can hear you now.
No, this is Comcast playing games with me.
Okay, we can
No,
hear you.
I wasn't working in the clubs at all.
Were you at Hi-Fi at that point?
Maybe
I'm trying to remember our conversations.
being a short order cook. I was good at that too.
Did you have any idea of possible wanting to bartend at that time? Like, was it something that you were interested in or thinking about?
I don't even think I thought about it. I don't even think it crossed my mind.
Gotcha.
But I
you.
can tell you though, 91 was my first Sisters of Mercy show. I think.
I'm definitely going to ask you about that for sure. So how about you, Eve? Let's look at 1987.
So I had just come out of finishing college. I had spent a year in France, and I had come back with like a shaved head, and had kind of really discovered myself in France, and this kind of edge of punk rock. I found the Clash, and blew my mind when I really connected with that. And I came back to Boston, and a friend said, we should go out to this club. And Terry, you were working in the coat room when I first came.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. And I just was like, oh my God, this place just really let me be me. And I immediately, I must have come a handful of times, and then I immediately was like, I have to be a go-go dancer. I have to be able to have that booth space. I have to be able to just dance all night long. And I was 100. My girlfriend used to come with me. We drive from Brookline. And she would come with me. And then at the end of the night, we'd all hang out and drink. And she would go back to the car and sleep in the car while I finished hanging out. And then we would drive back, and I was living either between my mom's house in Brookline or I was living in Mission Hill. And I just married that music, and it just couldn't get enough of it.
That's a compatriot right there. That's someone that's willing to sleep in the car while you go dance.
She's my best friend.
That's awesome.
Still to this day. So
Dwayne, how about yourself? You're quantum leaping back to 1987.
That was a very transitional time for me, late 86 going into 87. I had started my radio career in Maine. I'm back in Maine now, but I spent 30 years in Boston area. So I moved there. I had been a big fish in a little pond up here. I was the music director of a very large FM radio station, and I had worked very hard to instill a good music sense into the audience over a 5-year period that I worked there. Echo and the Bunnymen, U2, Early Sisters of Mercy, The Cure,
Yay.
all mixed in with an eclectic format that was doing, you might hear Jimmy Buffett on some people's show. You might hear Zeppelin, you might hear Jane's Addiction, from the first album. So all that stuff was happening at once, and I worked very hard to achieve that. And then the station was sold to a guy from New York who was like, no more Echo and the Bunnymen, it's Bon Jovi and Twisted Sister. So I picked up my act and went to, I was hired by WFNX part-time. So I remember driving down and FNX was a very hard signal to pick up even in the Boston area. Even in Lynn, when you were right on top of the friggin' thing, it still, until they fixed everything and got it going the way it really should, got the antenna turned around towards Boston instead of the middle of the ocean, which is what it had been broadcasting.
Oh God.
If you were a lobsterman, you could get great reception out there. If you're in Brookline, forget it. I'm sorry. If you were in your car, it just wasn't going to happen. But anyway, so I'm driving down, right? And it's like 11:30 in the morning. And it comes into signal strength, and Attack Ships on Fire by Revolting Cocks is playing at 11:30 in the morning. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus. This is going to work just fine for me, So unfortunately, they did a trial thing with me, and it worked out. And I moved down and lived with some friends in Rockport, and then drove all the way to Lynn every night for, a 10-hour weekend shift, 2 5-hour overnights at $6 an hour. And so fortunately, my friends let me live there rent free for a little bit until I got my shit together. And so at that time, when I first got to FNX, Paul V I think he was still doing a part-time slot there somewhere. I'm not sure if it was an alternative to the alternative type of show like FNX did Moods for Moderns, which went deeper into the format. But I met him through the station there, and also hearing the ManRay commercials is how it acquainted me with the club before I ever went. And Paul told me about it and said that he had, did some spinning there. And this was before he went to Warner Brothers in LA. So that's kind of my anointment and initiation. So of course I went to ManRay because I was very interested to see what it was like, because the clubs in Maine and even the clubs that FNX had been associated with in some of the outskirts, like what was Edible Rex and, all the places way out in the burbs. And ManRay was the club that really stood out to me, along with Axis, because of Axis's history with Spit. That was very cool to me. But ManRay's club on its own, the way the building looked, it was kind of ominous when you walk. Now, keep in mind, I'm coming from Maine, this is what I'm seeing for the first time. And I'm like, oh man, that's kind of like a morgue mausoleum looking, And then I walk up and I meet Adam Lewis, and he's, letting me in, and we became fast friends. And so, and then, I was lucky enough to host their Nirvana show, which we'll talk about a little later there. And so that was kind of my year of 87 was transition, get myself stable. Not only was I working at FNX, but I was doing overnights at a White Hen Pantry 5 nights a week in Peabody.
Wow, you've dated it by you saying the words White Hand Pantry. You've
right
dated
next to the
this
Bunghole Liquors,
perfectly.
the famous Bunghole Liquors.
Oh, yes.
Even
yes.
Oh,
that-
that's still there.
Yeah, so that's where I worked, and drove the FNX van for a little extra money during the day. So the FNX van would be parked at the White M Pantry at 3 in the morning, and people would come in and go, "Why is the FNX van here?" And I would explain, "Well, I'm the van driver, blah 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 blah." They'd be like, "Ring me up."
That's awesome. So this is great. That's actually a great transition into my next question for you all. So what I'd like to do is get your particular perspective on what you saw as Boston Cambridge nightlife. And we don't have to stick with 87. We can sort of move between 87 and 91 if you want to offer whatever views you want. But what I'd like to know is your own personal view of what you saw at night as nightlife, not just Man Ray, but what else you might have seen and stood out to you as memorable in the Boston Cambridge scene. And we can start with you, Chris.
God. It's weird. I think probably at that point, the Charles River started being a dividing point. And Dwayne, what was FNX doing things with like Axis and stuff at that point in like 87, 88?
Yeah, 87 was the first X night.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that was very successful. That was a New Year's Eve X night, and we broadcast live. The stage was empty, and they just stuck us on the stage, and we were all doing ecstasy because it was X night, and that was supposed to be the whole thing. It was the wink, wink X night thing, which later it dropped that sort of aspect of it and became its own entity. But it was that first night was the club was hopping that night, and we piped in the end of the top 101 for the year, and then at midnight we went on the stage and did the countdown live and everything, and so it was so successful that the Lyons brothers immediately wanted to continue on, and we got the idea of, all right, well, let's do Saturday night, we'll continue with X night, but we're not going to pipe the music in, we're going to give you an FNX jock, and we'll rotate him a little bit. And they did that for a while. And then I made a pitch to them because I was the one that seemed to be drawing the biggest crowds. So I made a pitch to them: if you give me 4 out of 5 nights, 4 out of 5 Saturdays, and let me have the 5th one off and rotate another FNX jock in, then that would work out very well for me. And I could consider that kind of not a full-time club gig because I was still on the radio, but as close to having a regular night of my own consistently for almost 5 years. So yes, that was that's right around the time that it started, was that first night.
Well, for me, the club scene in Boston was kind of all over the place. I hung out at gay clubs, and I also, obviously, when I wasn't even working at Man Ray, I would hang out there. And the reason I asked was because I think that, that 87, 88 time or whatever, right around in there was when, I think as far as the DJs, when Man Ray was kind of thinking about what we were doing and how alternative we were going to be, and we were going to be an alternative to the alternative in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And we had people like Paul V working there, and Linda Lawrence, and people who really knew their stuff. And then when FNX kind of partnered with Lansdowne Street,
yeah,
that became a thing where it's like, I think Man Ray decided that we needed to just go a little deeper, and because now Lansdowne Street was more commercial because they had a radio station with them.
correct.
So we were going to try to go a little bit more left field on all of that. And Paul V left Man Ray to go work at Axis for a while. He went during the transition between Spin and Axis, I think.
Yeah. He's the first DJ, and that was at Access that I'm talking about, He's the first DJ that I ever heard overlay another record on another record and make his own mashup sort of live. And I'll never forget, it was Depeche Mode's Personal Jesus. And in the middle of it, in the break, he dropped in Jesus Christ Superstar. And
No way.
the beat. And my jaw was on the floor. And to this
Right back.
day, I mean, I've been doing this crap for 40 years. I still can't beat Mix Worth a Damn. Never could, probably never will. I can't roll a joint worth of crap. Never could, never will. It's just how it is in life. You do some things really good, other things you can't do. But I found a niche for myself where I found aspects in the music that reminded me of other songs and other parts, and I would blend there and make it work for myself. So I still did the continual flow like Chris and Paul V and other DJs do. It just wasn't so much a beat thing. I was very good about knowing where a song, like say something like New Order, comes to a stop point, and I would grab that stop point and use it to my advantage by that's where I would mix in rather than a beat. And I would come in with something heavy, and it worked when it had to. I mean, at X Night, that's what you had to do. I mean, you had to keep it busy and going all the time to keep the crowd happy and going like any nightclub, that you would do. But it was, yeah, you're right, Chris. I mean, once FNX linked up with Lansdowne Street and we started having the best music polls and the birthday parties and all that, and they were really heavily in bed with the Phoenix and vice versa. It was pretty obvious that now if FNX was, thinking outside of the box, Man Ray was in the other, you'd left the box. You were in the next room.
Yeah.
You were in the next friggin' room at that point. And that was great. And that made that separation, and that separation was clear. I never thought of it as battle lines being drawn. I just thought of it as a separate line of like, well, this is happening over here. We're doing this. And there is, when you put two circles together and link, there is a common area in the middle. And there was some of the people that were the common area.
Oh, there were a lot of people that loved both, that would go to like everything, go to Tuesday night at Access, come to the weekends at Man Ray, and just like, so it wasn't really, well, I think that maybe Man Ray was intimidated that Lansdowne Street had this other forum to advertise what they were doing, and Man Ray didn't. FNX
Access had a whole radio station behind them.
Yeah, and Man Ray didn't. So that, I think we always felt like the little guy, no matter what was going on.
Sure.
And so we really had to think outside of the box, or in some case outside of the room, to try to make things, work for us so we could still keep on doing what we were doing.
Well, to me, when I would go to Man Ray, I was doing, after I got hired full time, I started doing a show in the overnight 5 nights a week called Radio Free Boston. And then I would spend Saturday night at Access. So I didn't have, Friday night I had off because my Friday work was actually 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. So I was out at 6 a.m. Friday morning, and I didn't have to be back until Sunday night, early Monday morning. So, and to do Access in the middle of all of that. So Friday nights, it was usually really hard for me to pick where to go. First of all, X-Files, I was a big X-Files fan, and the X-Files was on Friday night at 9. So I knew where I was going to be then at 9, but then after that I would have to, I wanted to go somewhere. So it was either a show or a club, and I loved going to the Channel, and I loved going, to see the local bands. And now I also like to go to the clubs, like Man Ray, and hear what you guys were doing and just kind of blend into the crowd. And I was not really known when I walked in to Man Ray. Nobody really recognized me as if I were walking through Access. I would get pats on the back and, hey, how you doing, Dwayne, and all that. At Man Ray, it was not like that. It was just me walking up to the bar, getting a drink, and mingling off into the corner, seeing maybe a couple of my friends that
Well, I felt Man Ray was more exclusive. Like, I didn't feel like everybody I knew went to Man Ray, but everybody I knew went to Access. But I would go like to Illusions when Spit would have the underage night on Wednesday nights. That's how my first kind of foray onto the Lansdowne Street process. And I just had found this thing I wrote, and I said, Man Ray, Ground Zero, Bohemia, which was down at the Premier Diner, down under the Orange Line. They would, on Saturday nights, they did the premiere. Spit, The Nine, Illusions, Lucifers, Club M, Villa Victoria, The Loft, Celebrations, Venus de Milo, The Channel. So these things, like, I just went to all of the clubs, but I feel Man Ray, I became who I wanted to be at Man Ray, because when I would go to Lansdowne Street, before I would go to Man Ray, before I knew Man Ray, I would get dressed up. I would plan what I was going to wear for the night. And then I started to go to Man Ray, and that's when you had said that earlier, Dwayne, that's when I defined myself. Like, then I became who I was going to be. And then I would go to, so everybody knew me. I got into all the clubs for free. They knew who I was. I came up to the door. They knew I was the go-go dancer. I worked at overnight shift at the Blue Diner. Everybody would come in and see me. Everybody knew who I was. So that was, for me, it was this kind of time of just going to anywhere that was going to be. I probably went out every night of the week and danced somewhere.
And Terry, what about you? Where did nightlife fit into your world between those years, 87 and 91? Were you
I did go to Spit because I had people I knew who worked there. And Bunratty's, I believe, was still around during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also had friends who worked there. Club M wasn't my thing.
That was Vinny's. I can't think of his last name. Club M, Vinny. I can't think of his last name right now. He's the person who did Club M. And I worked the door for him.
Is that the same Vinny from Axis?
What was his last name? Yes, it was. It was the same Vinny.
I can't remember Vinny's last name, but he was, yeah, he was a pretty good guy.
He did that. It was down at Kendall Square.
Yeah.
That was there. Yeah.
There was a dance night. That's interesting, because Kendall Square is not an area I would have thought to have like an
I don't even remember that.
It was like a warehouse building. The whole thing was upstairs. People had to come in from the downstairs. It was totally made horrible. They did like a terrible, so unsafe. Thank God we never burnt down.
Oh, I remember the one in Chinatown that was like that.
Okay, yeah, no, not that. I remember that too. I don't remember what that was called.
I don't
What
know.
about the old Lizard Lounge?
The Lizard Lounge. There was the Loft.
Oh, the Lizard Lounge. Yep, I had friends who worked there.
I did too. I DJ'd a couple times there.
Spin-off, the
That's
roller
awesome.
skating rink. There was spin-off at the end of Lansdowne Street too, the roller skating rink.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, totally. We skated all the time there.
See, I missed all that. I come in at 92 and I miss all of this. This is why I'm so glad we're able to talk about this.
Well, you missed all the Ground Zero stuff too.
Right.
Oh, Sean, I think you've frozen.
Yep.
Yeah, Sean, you are frozen now.
How much money we pay for internet, and this still keeps happening.
Isn't that the truth?
Well, it happens on MSNBC. You're watching it, the audio goes out on somebody, or they lock, or they just lose the picture completely. And so that was one of the sort of annoying aspects of the pandemic and the lockdown and everything was, watching little squares like we are now. It became a Brady Bunch world,
I kind of like that. I like the fact that these companies that were, multi-million-dollar companies were stripped down to their basic, everyone's on a webcam. I love that actually.
But I want to say that about Chris was talking about, he brought up Ground Zero, which was where, to me, that really took a little bit more of that punk rock feel and really took that dance music, but really put it on a harder edge. And it had that tiny little dance floor, and the DJ booth was like the death trap because you had to crawl under and into the little hole.
It's why I have a bad back to this day.
I'll tell you,
entrance.
My boyfriend, Evan was my boyfriend. He was the DJ there. He was probably one of the most unique DJs.
Who was your boyfriend?
Kevin Jones. Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
For 8 years. He could mix the hardest core music and out would come Have a Nice Day by Roxanne Shante, like out of this thing. And he would mix, like, he had the most interesting ear. I thought it was the most creative.
And that's
Yeah.
where we met Noel.
Yeah. So
Yes.
Terry, is that who, when Tom Walker came in, is that who Tom Walker replaced?
Did he replace Diego or Kevin?
No, because I
Diego,
replaced
remember
Diego.
Diego?
I replaced Diego.
I
That's-
have to say, if we do have freezing and pop-outs, I apologize. I think it's just what happens in this world where we're trying to get a bunch of people in a digital room together. And
No, it's Comcast.
And I think
It's
we all
not-
understand it. It is part of what we just have. Nobody gets upset about it anymore.
I
I
feel
did
bad.
when they sent me a bill.
Oh, well, that's
Hey, and say, hey,
In that
you
sense.
froze,
I meant
you
to each
froze my
other
internet.
here.
Can I freeze my bill on you? I want to move on to our next question, so we have time for questions from audience members. What I'd like to also do is maybe from each of you get your perspective of Central Square during these years, what you saw within that sort of like dancing musical microcosm of an area. Like what did Central Square sort of say to you during those years? And you know, good, bad, ugly, happy, whatever you wanna share with. Chris, we can start with you.
Okay. Well, I actually moved to Central Square in '89, and I still live here. So I had originally come from Detroit at the end of '85, and Detroit was really vibrant club-wise, an amazing, intense nightlife, very much a music city, obviously. Boston, to me, during that time was kind of like, it was too clean and too pretty. It was like a mall with the roof torn off. So as a city, it was cute and novel, but I wanted a real city, and Central Square kind of really captured that for me, more than, you know, any of the other squares, or more than any other place in downtown Boston or places I'd look to live. So I became really enamored with it. And I mean, there was, you know, the Middle East, and there was TT's, and there was a place between Harvard and Central. Was it Jumpin' Jack Flash, or I don't know. There was, there were lots of like music venues where like Rick Berlin the movie would play, and like all these cool things. And a lot of the businesses were small, independently owned things. And to me, the atmosphere was so unlike anything across the river. I became really enamored with it. It felt like a real city. It felt very, very vibrant. Just everything culturally, from the music and everything, to just the way the businesses were run and the people who were there. It had, you know, there were lots of old hippies and stuff, and it just felt like a real mixing pot. There were people of all races living together, and it didn't feel as white as Boston did. And I felt very comfortable in Central Square. There was just a lot going on. So I thought it was the perfect place for Man Ray. I thought Man Ray is like the club that captured the whole spirit of what Central Square was about. It was really artsy. It was really out there. And it just offered.
Colorful would be
much.
the word I'd use.
Huh? What word?
Colorful. Colorful.
Yeah. It was very colorful.
In all its blackness.
Yes.
Black
Actually,
clothing mess. I
go
meant.
go off of that, Terry. So describe what you saw as colorful about the square. Like what?
Well, I went to Catholic school down the street, so I was already familiar with it 4 years prior.
I didn't know.
And I never had a problem, but when I would tell people that I worked in Central Square, they were like mortified. Aren't you petrified? Oh my God. And I'm like, scared of what?
Yep. Yeah, that was my big war. That was my big entrance into 1992 Central Square. I know we're jumping ahead a bit, but they're like, someone said, "Oh, you're gonna get stabbed," and you know what? I don't know. I'm going on 30, almost 30 years, and I haven't been stabbed yet. So we're gonna knock out on that.
Yeah,
That's right.
I was never stabbed in Central Square. Ever.
Never
Uh,
been bothered. Never been
But it
bothered.
it did have that mystique behind it, because it took me until I went there to realize that that wasn't what it was. Like, you know, you were told that it was a scary place to go and you should be careful about it. But I mean, I'm still close friends with a number of people from that time. Like, just, you know,
Mhm, mhm.
But I think a lot of that had to do with maybe a Boston mentality in general. I remember when I first moved here, people told me that the Ramrod was a scary bar and scary things happened there. And it's coming from Detroit, it was just kind of like, I don't know, an outdoor market. You know, it was like fun and whatever. There was nothing scary about it. So I think that it's kind of like a Boston thing
Yeah.
where they kind of didn't really
well, it was very
know what to
ethnic.
be worried about.
It was very
Mhm.
ethnic and very arty, and that's scary to most people. So of course it was labeled. Like, I thought, like when I was a child, my family would go because that's where the Szechuan restaurant was. Like, so we couldn't get, we had Golden Temple down the street from us in
Right.
Brookline, but we could go to, you know, and have eye-watering, hot, spicy food that we couldn't get anywhere else. And already the dance complex was a part of that place, because they had
Right.
already, Roseanne had already taken over that place. I mean, that, you know, really brought in a lot of change. Like you say, 92, that was I'm but what, wasn't it gentrified already by then?
No,
probably
it certainly
was. It
wasn't.
probably
But it
was
certainly
separate from
felt
the-
like it should have been. It felt like, you know, it was going that way. You know.
But I mean, one of the things I loved was you had great restaurants. You had Man Ray. You had the Lucy Parsons Center. You had, you know, you had all these different things. I felt like it was almost as if like, I'm not demeaning it by saying this. It was like a buffet. Like you could always go and find what you were looking for, even if you didn't even know it.
In more ways than others.
Oh yeah.
Dwayne, what were you as a main, you know, as a main denizen?
Yeah.
What were your views in those years, 87 and 91 of Central Square? And
You know, FNX was located in Lynn. Now, like you said, you know, I'm coming down from Maine. I was raised 5 miles outside of a podunk town to begin with. So all of a sudden I'm living a few miles outside of Central Square in Lynn, Mass, a different Central Square, which commonly, if you ever had been to FNX for any reason, you knew that it was called Central Scare because it was crime ridden. Prostitutes, junkies, everybody was trying to sell you something in some other. They either wanted to get in your pants or your now. So that was quite eye-opening to me. So when somebody said, well, there's another Central Square in Cambridge, I thought, oh, Jesus, oh no, I'm going to go over there for, you know, part 2. But it was not. It was refreshing. And the ethnicity was great. The food was wonderful. The fact that at the Middle East that there were basically 2 worlds going on under one roof on 2 different floors, I thought was phenomenal. You know, you're getting your falafel on upstairs and you've got Fear playing
Mosh pit downstairs.
Yeah, with Fear playing, or the Zulus, or whoever was playing
FUs.
at the time. And so, and then, you know, my initiation to TT the Bears was a PJ Harvey show, which was very intimate. You all know how small TT's is, especially in the room where the stage is.
yeah.
And she did this really, the opening was, you know, she had an acoustic guitar. It's just her on stage and she's playing and she's in the mic, you know, really whispering very softly as she sings. And then she rears back and she had pulled the audience right in like, what did she say? What? And then she reared back and let them have it in that room at a decibel that I've never heard to this day, loud in TT's, where everybody jumped back with a what the fuck moment, you know, was that? And so that was kind of my initiation there. And I thought, wow, that's, you know, that this is very much like a living room situation with just, you know, it's very crowded, but it had a feel of like being at a party, TT's, because it was so small. It wasn't like a big club like the Channel where there were all these back rooms to go into and something was going on over here in this room and this back bar and everything. It was much more minimalized there. And I thought that just in general, Central Square offered so much diversity in all music, food, arts, entertainment of all types, skin colors, dress, hair. It was really its own little sort of sanctuary that the people of Cambridge. I remember when I moved down, people were like, "Oh, the People's Republic of Cambridge," and I'm like, I don't understand what that means. What is that supposed to mean? And later on, you know, they made it seem like it was a very negative connotation. But after associating with that area for a number of years, I realized that it just came to mean, look, we're not putting up with your bullshit. We see through you.
I wanna land this question with one business in particular that was germane to Central Square, which still is, and that is Hubba Hubba. And I count us lucky that we have Hubba Hubba in
My
Central
girl
Square.
Susie.
And Susie brought just such an electricity and an amazement to that business. And it's the one place where I would be like, if I took my high school friends who had never been really into the city, I'd be like, oh, we have to go to Hubba Hubba. And when they saw Hubba Hubba, they were like, we're not in the South Shore anymore. We're in the big city. So
Not in Kansas anymore.
exactly. I want to ask one more question and then get into some individual questions for each of you. And this,
Jump in quickly. I'm sorry. So
oh,
here's
I'm
my,
sorry, Eve, please. My apologies.
here's my Hubba 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 jacket.
That's
Excellent.
awesome.
Oh
I still
my.
have my I mean, I have some stuff left over from that time, but I still have my Hubba Hubba jacket. I mean, that meant so much to me, you know. Sorry, so I didn't mean to
No.
cut in.
That's why we have these things so that,
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
you-
Wasn't Hubba Hubba basically on display every weekend at Man Ray? I mean, there was
pretty much.
Well,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
a
I
good,
learned my
that's a good point.
fashion from it. I mean, I would buy dresses and I would slit them and then I would fill them in with safety pins. So the whole back spine of my dress was a row of safety pins, and I would sit there with like boxes of safety pins and cutting this and, you know, all different things for the,
Oh
you know,
yeah, I remember that.
I
So
still have those skirts.
what I'd like to do is get into the sort of musical mind of 87 to 91, and each of you are individual lovers of music, but all of you have a different job or a passion or a calling that music is involved with. So what I'd like to do is ask each of you where you were musically 87 to 91. You know, were there bands, groups, singers, genres that were big and maybe, you know, were a big part of your time in that time of you? So I guess we'll start with you, Chris. Where were you musically 87 to 91?
I was really kind of all over the place, because I had what I liked musically, and I was, you know, a big 4AD person, big synth person, big new records person, stuff like that, versus what I was doing in the clubs, which, you know, may not necessarily have been all of my taste, but there was always stuff that I loved involved in that too. Some things I might not listen to at home. So my music taste was really all over the place, and some of it, well, I mean, a lot of my job entailed just like finding cool things to play in nightclubs. So, you know, I would go to New York, go to the West Village, go to record stores there, and look for things that weren't stocked in record stores in Boston that I could play. There was a lot of experimenting musically. You know, buy records by what their covers look like and stuff. So yeah, it was really all over the place. And it wasn't until Ground Zero opened that I began to segregate things a little bit more. You know, the one thing I should say about this time we're talking about is that unlike now, music wasn't really segregated into, okay, this is goth and this is industrial, and what is alternative, and there's this subgenre and that subgenre. It was all pretty much, if you were playing left of the dial stuff, it could be Bauhaus, it could be Revolting Cocks, it could be Lords of Acid, it could be just like a really wide variety of stuff. No one was really hell-bent on tagging something with a subgenre so perfectly. So it made, I think, our jobs as alternative DJs really free and open in a lot of ways. So, it wasn't like a thing like I was going down, say, a Ministry rabbit hole, and that's all I would play or anything like that. They were part of it, but it was just, there was a lot of stuff out there. And I think as DJs, and I'm sure Dwayne would agree with this, we all had big nets that we were casting and finding lots of really cool stuff to haul in and present to people.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I miss is record shopping almost on a daily basis. There were so many different stores and you would want to spend hours in each one. So it wasn't like you could hit 6 or 7 in a day. And I'm talking Mystery Train, Nuggets, Planet, all of those
Skippy Whites.
great places to go to and just immerse yourself in not only the vinyl, but the other aspects, the things that they had. I mean, Newbury Comics was great. But the commercialization of it over the years became kind of evident, the direction that they were heading in, which made the other ones more appealing because they were dirtier, grungier, grimier. And I don't mean grungy like in the music sense. I mean like literally there was a smell when you walked into Nuggets. There was a smell when you walked into
Yes, that record mold, record cover mold.
I love
exactly that sort of wet cardboard and
yes,
the vinyl and everything all in one fell swoop. It hit you as you walked in and you went, I'm home.
Yeah.
And you wanted to stay there because that was a comforting sort of blanket smell as you thumbed through all of the stacks and tried to find stuff. And somebody might be selling something, when you walked in and you're like, don't even put that out. I'll take that right there. Give me, that's a Cult 12-inch promo. I'll take that because I collected, if there wasn't any promo stuff that I couldn't get like from other countries. I mean, Warner Brothers and all the labels in Boston were wonderful to the radio stations and the individual DJs. But
yes, they were.
They really couldn't give you too much imports. It was hard for them to get them even on their own labels, like Jesus and Mary Chain things early on that had B-sides that I wanted to play in the overnight because they were playing the regular Jesus and Mary Chain during the day. So at night, I wanted to differentiate myself from what was going on FNX during the day. So I wanted to play the deeper cuts. So it was always nice. And no DJ is supposed to sell anything that says for promotional use only, not for sale, but we all do. I'll give up 10 copies of the new Aerosmith album so I can get 1 copy of Lard or Revolting Cocks. No problem, because I didn't pay for the 10 Aerosmith. So and it's nice, and you're not supposed to do that. And I understand, but the people that liked Aerosmith and collected Aerosmith now could get a gold stamped promo one, and I got what I wanted. So it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Eve, now you're in an interesting different position where you're dancing to the music rather than playing it. Tell me a little bit about during this time, like what is literally moving you?
Oh man. Well, I mean, I'd say like Pet Shop Boys, that whole kind of new wave, flying. Say that again?
I'm sorry, I'm reading the screen. I apologize.
That's okay. And the New Order, the Smiths, the Cure. I never saw any performances at ManRay, but I saw plenty of times. I saw the Cure repeatedly. There was a woman that I became very friendly with at ManRay. Her name was Wendy. I can't think of her last name either right now, but she took me to see concerts all the time. We used to have so much fun, but the music that was making me dance was this kind of the edge of punk rock with a dance beat that just like I just couldn't stop dancing. I honestly, and then there was a style of movement at the time that your feet were together and you were kind of doing this kind of like pumping thing where you were working your way down to the floor and being in that cage and just being able to like just it had the two walls of the mirrors behind me and they had that kind of rounded front. It was like it wasn't just like, it was like a corner, but it was rounded. I remember like one time when Man Ray, we painted it. We redid the thing and they covered everything with brown paper wrapping before they unveiled it. They were going to pull off the brown paper, which then the paint stuck to the brown paper wrapping. It was a little bit of a debacle in some of the areas, but I remember wrapping myself up with that brown paper and having people like boost me up into the booth so that I could dance and I could rip out of the paper, you know, and like emerge like the walls. And
That's amazing.
to me, I mean, it was even Paul V was the DJ when I first started, and then Chris came. So I was there during the time of Paul V, and even that changed. The two of them were very different DJs. They had very much similar music, but the way that they combined it was very different, and it was really always such a journey to like be able to dance and kind of. I felt like we were talking. I felt like they knew what I wanted, and I could just. I mean, I didn't want to take a break.
Gotcha.
You know, I never wanted to come down.
And Terry, where were you musically at this time? Did you have your music sort of taste set, and was there openings into new music that you were finding at this time?
Oh yeah, I let other bands in, but it's still the Holy Trinity all the way.
And
like I said, my first show was in '91 at Wembley Arena.
Oh wow. That's awesome.
So Terry is the kind of person, and I've spun with her in the room for many years, starting at the Ground Zero stuff, where she wouldn't necessarily know the artists, whatever, but she knows what she likes.
What did you say, honey? You were frozen.
Oh, I said that I've spun for you a lot over the years, and you're the kind of person that doesn't necessarily know what the artist is, who the artist is, but you know what you like.
Your job.
Right. So, you know, I'd play a song by the Church or something, and Terry would come up with a name for it. And
the Fish song.
The Fish song. She's talking about Reptile by the Church.
Okay, this is indication of how two people know each other just absolutely intimately, where all she has to say is the Fish song, and you knew what she was saying.
Oh yeah,
I didn't at first. And then for a while at Ground Zero, she was asking me to play that 18 song.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Alice Cooper, what's going on? I haven't played any Alice Cooper.
Well, we love Alice Cooper too.
But I know, but it turned out it was 80s by Killing Joke. And, you know, just by those little hints, like the Fish song, you can kind of determine, okay, maybe she likes the Church, maybe she likes Killing Joke, things like that.
I have a story that fits kind of in that. At FNX, when we added De La Soul into regular rotation, after they'd been on for like a week or two, a guy called the request line one afternoon and said, you know, you guys play some really outrageous bands, and some of the names are really crazy, like Revolting Cocks and stuff like that. But you're just you're playing this guy Dale Asshole, and I can't.
Oh my!
And I went, Dale Asshole. He goes, yeah, the 3 is a magic number. I'm like, De La Soul. So as a joke, a running joke, on FNX, we all started saying Dale Asshole because it was the same. De La Soul, Dale Asshole. So I you know, people hear what they think that they're hearing. So I understand that always. You know, there's a bathroom on the right. The CCR song. No, it's Bad Moon on the Rise, but okay.
Yeah.
So this is great. What I'd like to do is actually ask a few individual questions. And the first person I'd like to start with is you, Dwayne. So Dwayne, as we're going to talk about in the book, and as you've talked about in your book, King the DJ, you were MC of a very special moment in Man Ray's history. And I'd like for you to maybe talk about that moment, how
Sure.
it came about, and your thoughts and just sort of overview of that moment.
Sure.
Please.
And the band that we're talking about is Nirvana. And so I'm doing the overnight show Radio Free Boston on FNX, and I'm shopping at Rocket Records, Route 1 in Saugus quite a bit. I have a friend that worked there, Jeff Capania, and he was able to order, some of the imports that I wanted and stuff. So a guy that worked with me at FNX by the name of Kurt St. Thomas was living with Audrey Clark, who was the singer for the 360s. And they were living in Salem, and she had a child named Ian from a previous marriage, and he was 4 years old. And he said to Kurt one day, they were watching a skateboard tape, and he goes, this is a 4-year-old boy. You play a lot of cool music for me. I want to play this one for you. Put on a skateboard VHS tape, and Love Buzz from Nirvana was on it. And so Kurt St. Thomas took that information, brought it to me, because I could play anything I wanted in the overnight, where the daytime jocks did not have that freedom. You had to, you could toy with the format a little bit during the day, but not like you could at night when there was no ratings and, F-bombs were allowed after midnight, that sort of thing. So anyway, he tells me about, Love Buzz, and I listened to it, and I immediately call Jeff Campagna at Rocket, and I say, can you get me a copy of this album? He's like, yep, it's called Bleach. Came out about, 3 months ago. So I started playing Love Buzz and other tracks from it in the overnight. No official ad for FNX whatsoever, but no other commercial station in America was playing Nirvana at that time. Sub Pop didn't even have any money to push the record in any way, shape, or form. They were such literally a garage outfit at that point. And the term grunge came from the secretary who answered the phone once and said, how do you describe the music that your label is doing? And she just went, I don't know, it's grunge. And that term stuck right there from one little phone call to Sub Pop. So now, I see Nirvana is going to play at Man Ray. I saw it in the Phoenix, and my eyes bugged out. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding? That band is going to play. I immediately called the person who was booking at the time, the show. And that was, oh gosh, her name evades me right now. Famous.
Is it Joyce Linehan?
Yeah, Joyce Linehan, exactly. Yeah. So I called Joyce and I said, Joyce, I play them, pretty heavily night after night on FNX. Do you think there might be any way that I could MC the show, just bring them on stage? Not knowing what Nirvana was going to blow up to do. I just wanted to be the one to go, hey, here's this really cool band that I've been playing. Please welcome Nirvana. So she goes, sure, you could, an FNX jock bringing this no name band on from Seattle. Sure, it's going to help, with the tickets if you're pushing them during your show and everything. So it was an intimate crowd, estimated from 60 to 80. And I arrived early and I went downstairs to the green room, which basically always smelled of obviously leather and sweat. There was a pool table in there. There was a couple of couches that probably added to the odor. But it was a very cool sort of musty room, and a lot of bands had been in there, and it had, some history. So I go in and, I'm pulling out a bag with joints and Kurt and Chris, and it wasn't Dave Grohl at the time. It was Chad Channing playing drums. Dave had not yet become a part of Nirvana. So we talked and smoked a little bit and had a good time, and Kurt St. Thomas was with me. And so when it came time, I hadn't really cleared it with the band, and Joyce was just like, just go down and tell them you're going to do it. And I didn't feel like saying like, hey, I'm going to do this. I wanted to ask and make it proper. So I asked, and Kurt Cobain said, yeah. You're the jock that plays us. Yes, of course you can bring us on stage. So that was a really proud moment to go out and be able to say, and they had given Kurt and I T-shirts as a thank you. And on the back of it, the front it was a white T-shirt, and it was orange, like fluorescent with Dante's Inferno, with all the levels of Dante's Inferno. And then on the back, it said, fudge packing, crack smoking, Satan worshiping motherfuckers, and then the Sub Pop logo. So I read it once, I remembered it in my head, and that's the intro that I said, please welcome, Fudgeback and Crack Smoking. And I didn't stumble it. I could have easily because it's a mouthful and a half. I didn't stumble it, and somebody recorded it. And so for posterity, it's on my SoundCloud page. And the day that I put it up on Facebook, Michael Murata grabbed it and put it up on Vanyaland. And then it just went crazy from there. Pitchfork Media, Spin, Rolling Stone, they all had it on their site. And it's gotten about 100,000 downloads since that time. So that was a really wonderful time and a wonderful moment, because obviously Nirvana was important to me and extremely important to a lot of people, not just, and it still continues to grow. There's a mystique, mostly because of the death of Kurt and all of those things. But to have that few moments with them, and then because of that, they came back and they played the FNX 8th birthday party at Axis. And then when they found out that that wasn't an all ages show, they did a $5 all ages show at 5 o'clock the next day at Axis, which I also attended. But I think every cool kid that wanted to start a band and did came to that all ages show the next day for $5. How could you not pay $5 to see Nirvana? At that point, Nevermind was just coming out. It was now Dave Grohl's band, and they were in full force and a force to be reckoned with. And after those shows, they immediately went to Europe. And the blowover of Nevermind taking off and the MTV exposure, and suddenly Nirvana is a household name, eluded them for a number of months until they came back home and started touring here. And then they were like, it was, we all know how it ended, how it built, and the way that the love and the affection also caused the destruction, which is a very odd thing to happen, but yet it did.
But I think that this is a great moment in Man Ray history, and it's indicative of, and one of the things we want to do with the book is really show the different types of bands that have graced that stage. That Man Ray was not just a place that you could go dancing, that you could catch a really eclectic, great show. And,
Chris knows,
and we'll be talking about in future, in the book and in future panels, we'll be talking about like KMFDM, and in the previous one we've talked about the Divine Show, and hello, and yeah, I feel like it was a really neat moment in music and Man Ray history that just kind of comes together, and we're going to do our best to sort of showcase that in the book. So thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
My next question is for Eve. And Eve, I want to ask you to give me your sort of pulse of how Man Ray was as a venue for dancing. Like how did, like you were a go-go dancer there. So you were dancing and people were looking at you to see how you moved to the music. But I always feel like with the dancers, and I've talked to a few people in Fantasy Factory about this and others, is that it's not only you dancing, but you're watching others dance. Tell me a little bit about what you saw, not only as a dancer for yourself, but what you saw with other people at that time. Oh, you're muted.
I know, I realize that.
Gotcha.
So, I think it was a real essence. I think especially at Man Ray, there was a general way of moving. Even though everybody danced very uniquely, they were all within a similar C frame of rhythm. So the eclectic movements would kind of just move together like an amoeba on the floor. So if you were on the floor, you could be dancing here, but then the movement would cause you to end up on the other side of the floor late as the dancing moved, because you kind of flowed with it. And even though I was above everybody when I was in the booth, I still felt like I was being impelled to move by their energy and all of our energy and our relation to what the DJ was putting out for us, like I said, as before, as if they knew what we wanted to hear. Like they could feel they were inside me and they knew the flow. I mean, there were times that I would hear mixes in my head that I remembered from the night before that just like blew my mind, that made me just want to basically have just throw myself and thrash, because I just couldn't stop not wanting. I had to move and dance to it. And I really felt like it was a real expression of time. for so many people who came there at that time. It really, especially in this early years, and I really never went again. After I didn't go again because I got very involved with house music, and I was no longer part of the underground scene. In that sense, I was part of the underground house music scene that just, you know, is a totally different genre of music because I had come out of disco. Like when I first, I mean, to me, disco was like, I just loved it. And when I went to France is where I first kind of found that new wave beat that was starting. And then coming back to, like I said, to Vermont, there was a nightclub in Vermont that just, I mean, played the best new wave. I just blew it. And so coming to Man Ray that time, I mean, I walked in and there was actually the story I have is there was a person who was go-go dancing. I went with my friends one night and she got out of the booth and she went away. And I was like, oh shit, I am going up in that booth. That is like the best thing I've ever seen. And I'm up there and I'm totally jamming it. I can tell people, because I mean, I was the type of person that people would part the crowds and let me dance. Like if I went to a nightclub, people would give me space because they wanted, I mean, I'd leave the floor. You're the best dancer I've ever seen, you know, whatever. I mean, I learned dancing to Soul Train on Saturday mornings. I would sit in my room and use the big window screen as a mirror, and I would learn how to dance, you know. And so, but Man Ray, so she got out of the booth, and I went up there, and all of a sudden she's down at the bottom of the booth, you know, swearing at me, "Get the hell out of the booth, you bi, you know, get out! I'm working tonight." And I'm like, "Not after tonight, you're not." And so that next day I called the manager and I'm like, "Hey, you know, you looking for more go-go dancers? I'd love to do that." I think so. You auditioned me. I actually went on a Sunday night and I auditioned that next night. And after that point, I was there every Friday and Saturday night. I took over that spot.
Awesome.
I want to
Thank
take
you.
a moment and just special recognition for the dancers, like
Okay.
yourself, Eve, and the bartenders, because it was an amazing, you know, simpatico there. Everybody was on the same sort of, you know, mental thing, even whether it was Axis or even if it was Man Ray. I think it's phenomenal. One other thing I wanted to interject about the difference between the two locations when we were talking about Hubba Hubba was the sexuality that oozed at Man Ray that lacked at Axis. Yes, occasionally you would get somebody that was dressed to the nines and sexy and everything, but that was not the norm at Axis. It was much more, you know, I don't even remember if they let jeans in at that time or chinos or whatever, but it was more, you know, yeah, there was a lot of black, but it was just basic black. But the outfits at Man Ray when I would go were phenomenal. I mean, very, very sensual, very erotic in some cases.
So Dwayne, I'm really glad you brought this up, and I'd like to pose this to the group, and maybe Chris and Terry can have a particular look at this. So in future panels, we're going to be talking about the rise of Hell Night and Fantasy Factory, but maybe Chris and Terry, was there a general sort of like sexualized sort of feeling at Man Ray at that time? Like was there something in the place of what would be Hell Night and Fantasy Factory 87 to 91? Like was there a feeling or just sort of a nuance in the club in regards to that?
It was a feeling, I'd say. What do you think, Chris?
I would say, you know, initially when Man Ray started, just the whole idea of the quote unquote the art of nightlife, it was just begging people to be more expressive, you know, in the style of like, you know, maybe like the new romantic nightclubs in England or, you know, stuff in New York. And it was kind of just like, hey, you know, be yourself. I think that once Ground Zero opened in, I think that was early 89, around there, late 88, early 89. And it was more like a punk rock industrial club. And it kind of gave some of those people initially a place to hang out. And you could go in like all your spikes and with your hair up and everything. And that club was tailor made to explore that fashion and that sensuality, maybe a bit more than Man Ray was at that time. But I do think that just the fact that Man Ray existed as an artsy place gave people a lot more. It felt like they had a lot more freedom, and with the go-go dancers and stuff like that, it did feel very New York or very English in a way.
Yeah, European.
Yeah, European. It gave
It
you
was just sexy because it was. It was just sexy
Yeah.
because it was. It wasn't labeled yet. Like you were talking about the music at that time. It wasn't really labeled. And neither was
Right.
that. I mean, people wore, electric tape bras, like that would be their clothing.
But it's weird. It was sexy. It wasn't stripper. You know what
Oh,
I'm
no,
saying?
no, absolutely.
And it
Um,
wasn't one of those places too where you walked in and the place reeked of patchouli. I always
Well,
appreciate.
I was going to
It
say,
didn't, you know.
I'd go to Man Ray and everybody knew I was a punk rocker, that I was what I was. And I would go to Chinatown and I would get called a hooker in the same exact outfit.
Yeah.
But, Man Ray, I was like cool and it was what I was. And then in other people's eyes, it was a totally different, they didn't know what to do with it. I go to parties with my hair shaved, my whole head shaved, and that would be, you'd go to a cocktail party and I'd be the bald one.
I have a few more questions, and then I'd like to do is maybe open this up to our audience and have them ask some questions. One of my last few questions. I want to ask Chris. So, Chris, I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about, in this time in your life, the balance between musician and DJ. Where does the line sort of move in regards to the work you're doing as a musician and the work you're doing as a DJ? Is there overlap? Is there major difference? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think that they were kind of just two separate things that were going on a parallel track. If I had to go play a show or go on some small tour dates or something like that, they would give me the time off at Man Ray. I never really made a big deal about my bands at Man Ray, and at that time it was Figures on a Beach, and FNX was playing us a lot, actually.
Yes.
And so we did have some very high profile shows in town that I had to do, and so I never really had that kind of like, oh, how am I going to juggle two careers at once or whatever. It was just kind of, they seemed to work, and there wasn't any conflict there. Like I said, I didn't really use the club to promote my band music. And I just felt that both of those could be juggled easily in a way that worked, and it seemed to. So.
Excellent.
Well, you Chris, were fortunate enough to be signed by a good label that had strong Boston support. I mean, WIA, Sire being part of WIA with George Kabitas and Mr. Mike and Andrew Gavatzos and all of those people, I mean, they really rallied around FNX and BCN. They brought the goods home. They got us the early scoops. They got us everything. And Sire with Howie Klein and Seymour Stein was absolutely one of the premier labels at the time for, Echo and the Bunnymen. I can see all the labels in my head, all the bands that were on it, right straight through Madonna.
Oh yeah. And I mean, Seymour was the one who signed us from New York.
Yeah.
And then we also developed a really good friendship / working relationship with Howie in LA. And then when Paul V left Boston to go work for Warner Brothers, he worked with Howie in LA. So it just
imagine if you'd have been signed to something like RCA. What a difference, the Record Cemetery of America.
Exactly. Yeah.
That, it killed the 360s. I never wanted Audrey. She's one of my best friends. I never wanted that band to sign with RCA because I knew that it was a kiss of death as far as their A&R department backing anything. And at that time too, and Chris will attest to this, that the label heads were changing left and right. It was like changing underwear every day. Somebody else was running the program, and who signed you suddenly is not there anymore. You're dealing with a whole new A&R guy.
Right.
And you may not be as well on the same page as you were with the original.
Right.
Correct?
Yes. However, Howie and Seymour, they weren't going anywhere, at that time. And, you weren't here on the first one of these I did, Dwayne, but I met Paul when I first moved to Boston, walking into ManRay in late '85. And he was playing one of Figures on a Beach's records.
Oh, excellent.
As I walked in.
You must have been so happy.
So we went up, the whole band was there, and just by serendipity's thing, he was playing our record. So we went up and talked to him, and that's how we met. So funnily enough, as our relationship, we all became good friends with him. But then when he moved to Warner Brothers, our relationship had the other angle too. And he knew us from our very first, minutes in Boston. So it was kind of, it's
And Paul was a
fun.
really good guy too. And the fact that, later he became the manager for Porno for Pyros, and he
Oh yeah,
worked
for Perry.
very
Yeah.
hard with Perry Farrell on Jane's Addiction. And I think that he, helped bring Lollapalooza to fruition
Yeah.
by, putting label support behind it and everything. And that's another important thing too. Lollapalooza kicking off right, at 91 and 92. Was right in that niche of music that we're talking about, those years, because those years exploded with bands. I mean, the Pixies, Beastie Boys, Beastie Boys were already established, but they came on the first time the Beasties came out with that first album. It was more frat boy. By the time Paul's Boutique came out, they were much more structured. They were much more politically astute. They were paying attention. It was no more TNA music. It was now Free Tibet and
No more Cookie Puss.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Cookie Puss was their first record. I love that
Woohoo!
record.
I have that on vinyl.
As
Yeah.
do I.
Puss.
As do I. I love that.
So
As
what
far
are
as Man Ray goes, though, I would like to say that I think, what Dwayne is saying about the alternative music explosion, I think what was happening at Man Ray was that when Ground Zero opened, there was a bit of a delineation then, because Ground Zero was going to be the industrial punk, like the dark music stuff. And so Man Ray was kind of poised to be, at that point, instead of like the everything dark and alternative club, it became more of an alternative music nightclub in the sense of 91 alternative, in the way, where you'd still play, some 80s stuff, but that wasn't really cool. Played a lot of Belgian stuff, and, looked for stuff that maybe wasn't just outright industrial like Skinny Puppy, or outright pure pop. And like that whole alternative thing fit Man Ray perfectly. And then Ground Zero assumed all the dark, evil, burn in hell stuff.
Well, which is interesting, because if we're looking at like the different types of dance nights, like obviously there's, once Campus and Man Ray merge into Man Ray, there's the campus night. And then, we don't really have, your Hell Night, I know, Chris, you're at that point, you're probably still spinning some, consider what you consider new wave music, but not
Really, not at all. Not really a lot at all.
So then that makes me curious as to like what kind of dance nights, if we are talking more of a alternative, what type of dance nights are being put forth at Man Ray in this time? Like if we have Campus on Thursday nights, which was a mainstay, was Crypt earlier in that time?
No, certainly was not. Crypt came after Ground Zero.
I thought, yeah.
And so I will just make this statement now. When Ground Zero closed in 91, and Terry and I were assuming positions at Man Ray, we talked about this, and we loved what was happening at Ground Zero. And the thing we thought to do was, rather than just obliterate Ground Zero, it was bring the cool stuff that we were doing from Ground Zero into Man Ray. And that's where like Crypt came from on Wednesdays, and that's where the Hell Nights and the Fetish Nights came from. It became let's take this dark stuff that we had been kind of like perfecting over there in the small club, and let's bring it back to Man Ray and make it big. So before that, in the 87, 88 period, what we're talking about, where people like Linda Lawrence and Jared Hoffman and Paul V were doing a lot of the DJing, and I was doing a couple nights. And Linda was a Billboard reporter, so she was getting kind of, every cool record ever made sent to her. I think that we didn't really have to define the nights by, this is alternative and this is more alternative or whatever, it was kind of just the vibe of the club took over those nights. And I can't really say, if I was working somewhere else or whatever, I wasn't on all of Paul V's nights or all of Linda's nights, but I kind of knew the music they were playing. So maybe there was a bit of a cult of personality for the DJs, like people like Linda or people like Paul,
Right.
or something like that. But we didn't have wacky names for the nights, or it's like, this is our fetish night or whatever. That came after 91. As far as I remember. And like I said, that's all a little hazy. But Terry, do you think I'm right?
I do.
Okay.
Question
You're cutting
about
it. You're-
One of the things that I remember Ground Zero, I went a couple of times. It had a very cool vibe when you walked in. The one floor, and it was a fairly small, in contrast to Man Ray. And there was a TV that would be just showing static behind like a fence.
More than one.
I thought that was so cool. I borrowed that for every Halloween installation that I ever did for years. I would put a TV crooked and make it look like there was, the glass was broken. I would draw on it and then just put the static TV on as part of the Halloween display. And it really added a freakiness to it. Kudos to whoever thought of that. That was
Daryl probably, right, Terry? Was that Daryl
Actually, I
Delude?
think it was Bill who originally designed the place.
Oh, okay.
Did we lose Sean? I think we did.
Sean, did we
Sean,
lose
you're
you?
muted.
He's muted.
Yeah, Daryl, that was Daryl, but Daryl did all the graffiti there.
I'm
Yes,
also
okay.
thinking it's also very poltergeist. I'm thinking Tobey Hooper, director of one of the most scariest movies of my childhood. Never did static ever seem so scary in a movie like that. I'd like to open the questions up to our audience, and we have a few in the chat, but I also want to have the audience members, you have the option to raise your hand in Zoom. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask, please raise your hand and unmute yourself, and please ask any of our panelists anything that you'd like.
I'm not seeing any of the chat at all. So I don't know.
The first question that came into the chat was about what were some of the bands that played at Man Ray. I know we talked a bit about the Nirvana one in here. Maybe we could mention a few of the other kind of bands that came through, and some of the interesting shows like the Broken Floor.
The KMFDM floor breaking
I think
show.
those are going to be probably in later
Yes.
things.
That's a great story.
But I mean, are we talking about a glut of good shows during the time like 87 to 91? Like, are there certain bands that are sort of making the rounds at Man Ray at this time?
Consolidated was one out of San Francisco. You remember them, Chris?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
They came and played, and they had been. Remember, they were a different act before. They were not winter hours, but winter something. And then they became Consolidated, and it was a completely polar opposite type of band. But they were very much a band who triumphed for human rights, dignity, racial equality, female equality. I mean, they really pushed it hard. That they had a hardline agenda about it. And I love that band. I thought they were phenomenal. They had a song called White American Male, The Truth Hurts, which opens with a clip of a guy saying, "I'm embarrassed of my race. I'm embarrassed at being a white male today, followed by a second voice that says, well, you ought to be. And then the
Yeah.
music kicks. And that, hearing that the first time shook me, because I'm like, oh my God, that's kind of how I feel, you know? The white guilt was starting to kick in a little bit, because so many atrocities were happening throughout not only America but the world, and it seemed to be skin color and racially, biased and motivated. And to have a band confront that and then see them live at Man Ray was fantastic.
You're also sorry, my historian's brain's kicking in. I mean, 81 and 87, 91, apartheid is on everyone's lips. Like
Yes,
America's
sure.
looking at what South Africa is doing at that time, and you do have a lot of music which is coming out sort of addressing that. So yeah, that makes much sense that you would have.
But they Consolidated were also, they were talking a lot about veganism and stuff like that.
Correct.
I did a
Yeah,
thing
sure.
where I actually, I was there when they were sound checking stuff, and actually looked at their shoes, and they were wearing material as opposed to leather shoes. So I knew that they were being serious about what they were talking about. It's like, I'm going to talk about veganism, but I'm not giving up my docs. It's like that's
Or my leather jacket.
I'll tell you a quick funny Consolidated story. They came on the overnight show at FNX that I was doing, the Radio Free Boston, when the Myth of Rock, their opening debut, came out. And so they came on, and it was like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Nobody really knows who Consolidated is. We'd been playing one song which was self-titled, called Consolidated.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Really heavy EDM sort of beat that was in your face. And so now the album is out, and they're being quite controversial on the air, for a Phoenix-owned station that had the sexual pages in the back.
Right.
That came up from a listener, and that kind of bit me in the ass, and I was forced to really kind of just go like, look, on the air live, the Phoenix and FNX are two separate entities, although owned by, the same. The judgment and the ideology may not be exactly the same. So I understand, where you're positioned, but Adam the singer wasn't getting the response that he wanted, as far as people calling in and being able. He liked to confront, call it, just like he did in his music. He liked to confront and force you to bring yourself to the forefront, and then examine yourself and see if maybe you might need to be tweaked a little bit with your views of race and misogyny. When you think you're doing the perfect thing, well, let me show you one place where you're not. So he wasn't getting the call. So he said live on the air, and I'll never forget this because there's very few moments that I was speechless, but he said, okay, you know what? The LA Lakers are great, and the Boston Celtics suck. As a matter of fact, before I came on this show with Dwayne tonight, I was in a hotel room with Larry Bird. We were smoking crack, and he gave me head. Please call. And like the phones lit up, because everybody was so shocked. And now he's got the level of attention that he wanted, where he could start to have these confrontational phone calls on the air, with listeners. And I just thought that was like, I was so shocked at the beginning, but in hindsight, it was brilliant, really, because it really did open up a line of dialogue.
It was a
Although
great guerrilla tactic. Yeah.
But
totally.
but that was one of those moments that I was just absolutely like, oh, gobsmacked, like, geez, you got me there, buddy.
Before we move on to our next question, is there any other bands that anyone thinks of as sort of germane to this time period, also that maybe were on Man Ray stage?
Okay, I will say that at that point, Man Ray did not do a lot of live acts, but we did things with people like Joyce Linehan or something like that, where, she had a band, she would kind of put it in there. It wasn't until later that we did any actual shows. So I'm trying to think, maybe the Lemonheads played there, or did Mudhoney play there, or
Mudhoney did, but I don't know who that.
Revolting Cocks, right?
But that was later, I think.
Oh, after 91.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
Gotcha. Well,
So
this
as
is
far
great.
as this,
I remember the bags opened for Nirvana that night. I mean, that was
yes.
Awesome. Thank you all.
But, yeah.
I'm sorry, Sam, what was our next question?
Our next question was wondering if we knew whose idea it was to have dancers specifically at Man Ray.
Chris, Terry, Eve, what are
I
your?
don't even know.
I have no idea.
I
I
would,
imagine-
Was.
I would say it was probably Paul and the first people who did the
First one.
conceptualizing for Man
Oh,
Ray.
Bruce and Francis. Bruce,
Yes.
Joe, Francis.
I would say
Might have
Bruce
been.
and Francis and Paul probably got together, and you know how Bruce was talking about the clubs that he was using as an inspiration for Man Ray.
Right.
I think that those clubs probably had go-go dancers or something like that, and
That was
you know,
right. Mhm.
so he would like, I want that atmosphere, and we're gonna have dancers. You know, and that initial cage was like really, it was built into the bar.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't something that was portable.
No,
It's like,
it was
no,
a solid, it was its
it
own little
was-
entity.
Yeah, it was built in
Yeah.
to the wall, so it
Yeah.
couldn't be taken down.
Awesome. Does anyone in the audience have any specific thoughts or memories or questions they'd like to ask? This is the perfect time to chime in if you wish and give
I
your.
did have another question. Somebody who was reminiscing about how the Sunday's women's night with Chris DJing was super fun. And they were wondering what year was kind of the last year that happened and what had caused the end of that.
Yeah, you're right. It was really fun. It was actually how I got my first job at Man Ray was doing the women's nights on Sundays, which was really, really odd. Me being a guy and all, and they had female DJs there. But I became accepted there. It lasted still for, I want to say maybe another 3 years, maybe 87, 88. Terry, do you think?
I think a little longer because Maddie
Maybe.
ran it. Remember?
Yes, yeah. So like maybe I think it happened up until like maybe 88, 89, like ground zero time. It was kind of, that was there.
I think so too.
And so why it stopped is a good question. But I think the answer lies partly in the fact that at that time, well, the Sunday night in my room was premised a lot on the rock against sexism stuff. So, you know, I was doing the more like punk rock side of things. And there was the main dance room in the front that had the more dancey music. So I would play things like the Au Pairs and stuff like that, you know, and it was fun and raucous. I think there were two things that kind of spelled the ending of the night. One of them being that women just never made as much money as men doing the jobs they did. And gay women, I think, tend to be a bit more sensible with their disposable income than gay men who are just like, we're going to go out and party. So I think there was like a practical side to gay women saying, you know, we need to be more practical here. We can't go out to clubs, and we'll go out once a month instead of every night or every week or whatever. And I think that a lot of the younger punk girls who were, you know, doing drugs and drinking and stuff like that, as they got older, decided to straighten themselves out and become sober or just, you know, stop doing substances. And so club life didn't really mesh with their lifestyle as they were getting older, let's say. And in the end, I think it was a numbers thing. Just that gay women weren't going out so much. Now, I will say that Don, the owner of Man Ray, always, you know, when we couldn't keep the women's night open on Sundays open anymore, when Ground Zero initially closed in 91, he tried to turn that into a women's bar. He always wanted to have a space for gay women. And no matter what DJs we hired or he hired, no matter who we had behind the bar, the numbers were just not there. So I would say that the women's night was probably a victim of its time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think that also goes to at least what I feel is being able to even if things weren't going to go the way of keeping a night like that, at least there was attempts to keep something like that going. And there was always one of the things from the top down when it comes to Man Ray is the inclusion and ability to address different groups. And as we're going to talk more about this in panels to come, you know, that's not something that you had in Boston and Cambridge. I mean, you had it in small ways, but I feel like that 91 into 92 is this really interesting sort of opening into, you know, the addressing of different groups that were always there in Boston and Cambridge nightlife, but maybe never had a voice. And one of the things that we're beginning to sort of postulate with this book is that Man Ray offers that voice to be heard in giving those cultures, subcultures, scenes, whatever you'd want to call them, the ability to have a place to go. And it's not just, it's not just, once in a great while you'll have one of those nights in Boston or in some random club in Cambridge. It's a place that you'll have for now until hopefully forever, or in this case, another, 12 plus years.
I mean, but if you look at then versus now, where there's kind of like a death of the gay club. There's not huge clubs anymore. Society is a lot more integrated. You don't have to, feel that if you're a lesbian, you can only feel comfortable going out to a lesbian night, or you can, if you're a gay man, only feel comfortable going to a gay bar or whatever. It's just, things are a lot more integrated. So in some ways, the segregation of that time, it's a welcome thing that is it's not so necessary for that anymore. But I also think that are still really important as cultural landmark things. It's like, I happen to like being able to get together with a group of gay folk and just, being in the culture, let's say. And that's not as important anymore with dating apps and just everyone being able to go everywhere together. And Terry, you are frozen.
What?
You're frozen on the screen.
I can hear you, but you're frozen on the screen.
And what about with modern gender fluidity? I think Man Ray was so far ahead of its time in that category that if you walked in there, in 91 versus today, the audience wouldn't be that much different. I mean, the audience more adapted than the club did. I mean, not the audience, but society became much more open to acceptance of gender transitions, fluidity, and just the whole non-binary aspect of what we're seeing today.
Well, what we're seeing today certainly I don't think was as prevalent in terms of acceptance back in the day.
Correct.
And maybe another reason for like the end of the women's nights at Man Ray was the fact that we opened up with our fetish nights and our performance nights and everything like that. So you could go to Man Ray on any night of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And however you identified, you would feel comfortable. So,
care.
Gay women
the
went
word identity
to the gay men's night, or they came on the 80s night, or they came on a fetish night, or they came on a goth night. The identification wasn't so much about gender or sexual identity. It was more about what you like culturally.
And the word identity wasn't really even used at that time. It was more just who you were. You know, some people looked at you as, you know, oh, there's the freaks. And other people were much more accepting. And the world is still that way, but we've had our eyes opened, you know, through heartache and tragedy mostly to get to where we are today.
But I also,
Man Ray never thought of those people as, you know, like if you were non-binary, you weren't necessarily, you weren't a freak at Man Ray. If you were trans, you weren't a freak at Man Ray. You were just a person, you know?
So one of the things I wanted to mention, and this ties into this, you know, directly, is that we also have to, and we've talked about this, I think all of us have maybe talked about this in our interviews, is that Man Ray is in a spot in Boston, Cambridge, where you have Harvard, MIT, BU, Lesley. It seems, you know, pardon the pun, central to all these different schools where you have an influx every 4 years of people from all over the country, maybe even the world, who were the gay kid or the goth kid or the lesbian kid or the non-binary kid. And now they're able to go to a place that they feel comfortable at, but maybe they never even, that was never even a possibility living in, you know, Taos, New Mexico, or, you know, Seattle, you know, outside of Seattle, Washington, or Florida.
Cowhegan, Maine.
Yeah, or thank you, exactly. So now you have this place, and I like to think, and I think what we'll do is, before I give each of you a chance to sort of give a final word, I like to think that, you know, 91 was, you know, to use a history lesson here, there was a perfect storm that happened in October of 91. I like to think of this time for all these different people who are looking for a place to go as a perfect storm. The music's changing, the venues are changing, the acceptance is changing. Maybe not really, really fast, but it's changing in a sense that where we're witnessing it, you know, in a different way. So I just wanted to pose that out there. It's one of the things that has risen to the cream of the crop when looking at a lot of speaking to the interview subjects and talking about what Man Ray meant to them. That seems to be like, and I use this word in the previous two, but Man Ray was a safe place to go. It was a safe place to go to be who you wanted to be.
Safer than Axis.
Well, I'll even throw Axis in there, Dwayne. But I mean, safer than, say, like your Venus de Milo or your Avalon or your
City.
Yeah, exactly. Or what's the one in Kenmore Square? Narcissus, exactly. Or the Roxy.
That's the one club that I never went through the front door. I just never saw the need to go to Narcissus. Why
oh my God, Dwayne! I spun with Paul V there one night.
Narcissus used to let underage women go in together. Like, so if me and my girlfriends who are underage would go together, they'd let us in so we could, because that was okay. So I went to Narcissus quite often.
And it was
for that reason.
So what I want to do is I want to give each of our panelists a chance to sort of give a final word in this time period and in what we've talked about, and just sort of give an idea of, and I want to pose this to you in your sort of answer, is to talk about transition. What is it that we are transitioning to as we reach December of 1991 and we're about to enter into a new decade, and, you know, we've left the 80s behind us? What is it that you saw Man Ray transitioning to at that time? And also, what is it that you were transitioning to? So I'll start with Chris.
Oh God. You always start with me on these.
Well, that's just, I'm going in the order of introduction.
Okay.
So I'm not picking on you.
You're right. This was I think that this time frame was really a pivotal transition time for Man Ray. It was when Ground Zero opened and, you know, made its mark, and when let's say I was finding my voice as a DJ in Boston or in Cambridge, you know, finally, you know, after 3-4 years, just narrowing it down, seeing what was going on with myself and how I wanted to pursue things. So it's a really important time to me because this is where all the things are percolating that allowed ManRay to become what it eventually did after 91.
Well, see,
All of the ground zero influences that Terry and I specifically brought in to and we gave it a bigger space, and there was, I think, there was a certain comfort that you could enjoy being there, because ManRay always had that. But now we were specifically, I don't want to use the word targeting, but we were seeking out serious alternative lifestyle stuff. Like, it's when we started getting in, you know, doing the fetish nights and stuff like that. And then no nightclub in Boston or in Massachusetts or in New England was doing
wanted
anything.
to even touch anything like that.
Yeah, so they weren't doing anything like that. And we just, the era that we're talking about tonight is what made ManRay really seek out the counterculture that we loved. And then
And the misfits.
yeah, and play with that and expand that and build a nightclub around that. And I've told Sean this story for the book, but there were plenty of nights where I would see, you know, a kind of like gothy kid come in on a Wednesday night and then hang out in the corner. And then the next week he'd come on a Saturday night, which was a bit more mainstream, and he'd kind of go between the rooms, and, you know, and then a couple of weeks later, he'd be there on a campus night with his arms flailing to Dancing Queen by ABBA, you know. So there was just something about the place that gave people the space to find out who they were and who they wanted to be, find out who they were in real life and who they wanted to be in the nightlife world. And the time that we're talking about tonight is the time that made that all possible. So it's very important to me.
Terry, what are your, let's go off on that. Do you agree with that? Do you feel that you were witness to that?
Oh yeah. And the people who worked there, down from the people at the door to the owner to the management, okay, were never judgy about anything. You know, there was no gawking. If somebody, you know, had a problem with the man in a dress and just couldn't shut up about it, he would be asked to leave.
Hmm.
And I've done it myself several times.
So there was a level of insulation, so to speak, if you were.
I think so.
And
That if you didn't like what you were seeing, well, you're welcome to never come back.
yeah,
But don't harass the people that are there enjoying themselves.
Right.
which is so interesting. I just have to go on this because in clubs, it's very much like, you know, there's not that sort of protection in regards to like, I don't feel comfortable, where sometimes you might just be like, well, what do you want me to do about it? You know what I mean? Like in a lot of clubs, there's never that feeling of like, all right, this is a place I feel safe at, or this is a place I feel protected at, or I'm not going to be objectified. And
it wasn't unusual for the door staff to walk out an inebriated girl, put her in a cab, and the owner would pay for it.
that's so.
We were very protective of the people who, came to our place.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It was a very inclusive sort of family environment there that Axis sort of sorely lacked, because Axis was more generalized, where Man Ray was more specific to its own culture and supported itself in an organic fashion. Whereas, we had a different audience to a certain extent at Axis. I mean, you would have some of the Yahoos driving down from New Hampshire. No offense to
That's one
anybody,
of my
but you
favorite
know what I'm
words.
talking about. They weren't what they were, what you were hoping for necessarily 100% of the time at Axis. But I think at Man Ray, you always got what you expected. And certainly what Terry said about anybody that was dressed provocatively or gender bending, that was just a safe environment, and anybody that bulked at it was, like she said, shown the door.
Eve,
Yeah,
go on.
They were
Chris, please.
outnumbered too.
Yeah, they were outnumbered, exactly. So Eve, what are your thoughts on that? Do you see this transition happening? As you're, because I know you said you stopped going to Man Ray around 91.
Right.
Do you see this transitioning happening at Man Ray into being a place of inclusion and a place that people can go that
It already was that. To me, that's why I was there. With Chris and Terry just 2 years ago now, is basically I hadn't seen them all that time. And when I went to a night and I was dancing at, I'm sorry, I don't know what it is, Heroes, right?
Yep.
And there was a guy there that I had seen, was one of the first people that I ever saw of a man wearing a dress. And there he was, still hanging out. Chris was still his DJ. I was like, he didn't remember who I was, but I'm like, I remember you, my God. That time to I could shave my head, I could wear safety pins, I could be hardcore, I could be like, I feel like a lot of times with the new gender and self-expression today, that we were like we really ushered that acceptance in. Like I've always been, this is the longest my hair has been in, I don't know how long. And I often got stopped and asked if I was a guy wearing a dress. It never offended me. I just was like, I don't get it. I got boobs in. I'm like, I'm definitely a girl. I don't have an Adam's apple. But people would call out to me in cars.
Yeah, why do you ask somebody a question like that?
Say it again.
Why do you ask somebody a question like that anyway?
Ignorant.
Oh, we're all frozen again.
Who has any? I have no idea. But at that time, like you were saying, it was less often. It was less often that we would see men in dresses. Now it's like, of course, men wear dresses. Why the hell not? Why didn't we think of this sooner? Transitioning personally.
Yeah, I'm a leg girl myself.
I was tap dancing at the time, and then I slipped into flamenco, and then I found house music. And I mean, that whole world of being, once again, it was a very safe place. Bohemia and some of these clubs, they were so, even where maybe I was the only white person many times, I still felt completely like I was part of that group. Like I didn't feel any different, and they never made me feel different. And that's pretty much kind of just pulled me away, because once again, it had that disco, the house music just had that disco edge that I was really wanting to dance. And even the scene was shifting away from more of the danceable new wave, like Chris was talking about, like when he wasn't playing anymore. I kind of lost track of that station, but the music was changing at Man Ray even, and I was getting lost in that. Like, yeah, I'm missing that desire to dance for 10 hours straight, work at the Blue Diner, hop on the train, go into New York and dance at a club that was open at 11 o'clock in the morning, all the way until the next night, get back on the train and come back to Boston.
And Dwayne, I want to give you the last word here. Talk to me about what you saw as transition.
Well, it was such an explosive time for music. I mean, so many bands that we now hold, sacred and dear, not just Nirvana, but for me personally, like Jane's Addiction, Ministry, Public Enemy, Consolidated, and the Pixies, and expanding on the Cure and Susie and Echo and the Bunnymen and all those things at that time it was a phenomenal time for music, the club reflected that, in its values and its self-protection and self-preservation up until a certain point where, unfortunately, that wasn't allowed anymore. But it really was something to be a part of. I'm very proud to have been a part of that. I'm very happy to be a part of this and reminisce about it, because at the beginning you said take yourself back in a mindset to that era, and through this conversation, it has been very much present in my mind, as it has not been in a long time. It's wonderful to think about again. It was a reassuring time. We felt like we were getting some footing in life, that we were going to not just change things musically, but politically. But, that idealism has been around since Woodstock and before. Everybody has always tried to change. And I think our generation felt like, well, we're up at bat and we're going to do what we can. And we did. And we inched, along almost like an inchworm, gaining ground here and there in little bits and pieces until we have the world that we have today. But as you see, we're still fighting for everything.
Oh yeah.
And it can be taken away from us again in a heartbeat, with an election. And that's one of the things that we kind of have to come to grips with and come to terms with, that, every time, no matter how hard you fight for something, it can be taken away. And in the end, it seems like this massive chess game of you make a move, they make a move, you make a move, they make a move. Things get undone, things get redone, things get added, things get subtracted. But in the end, I'm really happy for that time period, because today when I meet young people and I ask, one of the first things, because I like to connect with people on a musical level, it tells a lot about the person. It tells you even whether or not you want to continue the conversation. And sometimes, I expect to hear, from a 20 or a 23-year-old, or maybe even younger, well, I listen to Taylor Swift and K-pop and, all the new trendy stuff. I'm shocked when they say, I love the 80s and the 90s. And I think that's probably comes from the parents, comes from the siblings. And it just makes me happy that music in that time frame will never really truly go away. And there's so many subsects and genres, having rave on the radio, having any type of thing, a second British wave that came, in the form of some rave and Oasis and bands like that, Blur, and all of that. So it was phenomenal, and we were blessed. We really were blessed. We were in the right city at the right time. I don't know what it would have been like to live in LA or New York and have the type of lifestyle that we had, but I'm glad that we had Boston, because I love all four seasons. I love the food. I love the diversity and the ethnicity. And I love the fact that, we're blue.
Yeah.
It's not a good place to live. It's blue.
Exactly.
Dwayne, when I moved here from Detroit, we did not have a radio station like FNX. Back where I was from, we had, some great radio, but a lot of it was AOR rock stuff. To discover FNX was like a breath of fresh air to hear. Like Echo and the Bunnymen on the radio was insanely great, or Brian Ferry or something, just like amazing stuff.
Any of that stuff to get behind Peter Murphy's solo career and embrace it on the radio. When Bauhaus was, FNX certainly played, Telegram Sam and Bela Lugosi, but Bauhaus didn't get the type of shot on FNX that Peter Murphy did solo, or that Love and Rockets, or got, or any of those subsect bands out of that era. FNX embraced them all, and we tried to give everybody the equal shot. In the end, it's sad how some of our heroes have let us down politically in the things that they say and do. It makes it hard sometimes when you thumb through your collection and you're trying, I do a weekly show and I have to pick out 2.5 hours of music, and to kind of look at Morrissey now or Johnny Rotten and go, gosh, or even Horton Heat for his backing of a certain orange-haired dictator. Where you just go, oh my God, I played you. I believed in you. And
how did that happen?
And it happens. It happens. And certainly people are allowed to have their own opinion. And certainly the life will continue no matter what. But it's shocking sometimes when you're let down in a way by certain people and things that you held dear to yourself and actually physically invested in. You bought their record catalog, a t-shirt, you went to their shows, you have a poster up. You know, in the end, you're spending hundreds on a band, and then they come along and they stick their foot in their mouth. And what are you supposed to do then? You've got all their shit. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to push that on?
We either choose to listen to it or file it away. And that would be the ultimate decision making, whether that person moves forward in
Sure,
infamousy or famous, depending on how.
Dwayne, do you still play Morrissey or the Smiths?
I don't play them as much as I did, and I certainly don't play solo Morrissey, and that's a personal choice just because of his, stick with your own tribe sort of mentality that he's had. Don't veer the course from your race or your.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. Basically, I just wanted to see where you.
And the same with Johnny Rotten complaining the homeless are living in front of my house on Venice Beach, and I'm finding shit in the sand. Well, too bad, dude. You shit in the sand once.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I just had a comment. What's everybody's opinion on like New Order, Joy Division, and like Susie, which she did the whole. I know they did the Nazi thing, like the shirts. I know they were just basically saying "F you" to the establishment, but there's "F you" and then there's being a jerk. And I know like New Order, I like their music, but that, the band cover with the kid with the drumming, that's like the Joy Division, but that's the whole Nazi division. Joy Division plus New Order. It's like, and people are like, if you shouldn't go to their concerts if you're against Nazis. And I was like, well, I didn't answer the question, but it was just, is that like a Pandora's box to open with people, or?
I think it is, and I think in the case of a New Order and Joy Division, it was an aesthetic that they were lifting from the futurists that Peter Saville lifted, and I think it was to be more mysterious than to espouse Nazi views. I'm certainly not going to cancel a New Order from my DJ sets. But at the same time, Bernard Sumner from New Order or Jillian or whatever aren't coming out and talking about how they hate immigrants in their town, like Morrissey is, or something like that. So I think that if they made some unfortunate aesthetic decisions 40 years ago, I personally am not going to really hold that against them. I will still play their music.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Too. I mean, as a DJ, it's really a tough call because I'll still play X, and Exene is
crazy.
John Doe is like the mastermind that holds it all together, and so I still love their Americana sound of what X has accomplished, and I can't flush everything. I guess the best way to put it is I flush what pisses me off. That's really, once it irks me, there's no looking back, and X hasn't really irked me yet in that regard. But yeah, it is a tough call sometimes because you got to think of your credibility. You got to think of your own. You have to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and go, well, I'm playing this for somebody who might, actually take it the wrong way and think that I'm truly supporting this now with this whole new philosophy that didn't exist in '88. It only existed, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, or whatever, when they changed and hit their midlife crisis or whatever it was that made them, open their mouth and insert foot like they did.
Yeah.
But it comes down to personal choice, especially when you're doing, trying to fill 2.5 hours a week with music. That's a very long time. That's not just 5 or 6 songs to pick for a quick playlist to take a road trip. this is something that I consider, and it weighs heavily on me sometimes. I don't want to ever be the person that shifted somebody's opinion the wrong way. I work too hard to shift people's opinion the right way.
That's wonderful. I think what we'll do is we will dovetail that nicely into a general thank you for everyone that attended, and a very special thank you for all of our panelists, Chris, Terry, Eve, and Dwayne. Thank you all for taking part and sharing your history and your memories and your passions. A special thank you to Ted and Sam for helping to moderate this. And we want to give you all on the right side, if you click on the chat, we have a bunch of places that you can find us. Most notably and most recently is our Kickstarter for our book. We ask that you check it out, read it over. If you want to donate, that's great. It's a great way to pre-order your book for our book, which will be coming out in the fall. It's also, we ask if you could share the Kickstarter with others. That's helpful in and of itself. We're also on Facebook. We're going to be posting this, and I'm happy to announce this here. We're going to be posting these on YouTube. We're creating a special YouTube channel for people to be able to see these. And you can email us anytime at manraymemories@gmail.com if you have any questions, thoughts, memories, anything you want to share with us. And I also want to end with Ted has put together through the donation of songs from our panelists today, a list of songs that we felt sort of surround their thoughts and their time and the time of 87 and 91. So please take a copy of the link. We're going to be posting this on our Facebook page. We will, it's there, it'll be there in future panels, and we're going to have more of these. We figure it's a neat little Spotify list for you to listen to and just sort of get an idea of the music that we've been talking about today. So I want to say a really big thank you to everyone here. You make these so great. Thank you for all the attending. Again, you make these what they are, which is a great look at history. And I want to say thank you to everyone and wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And sound effects were by Lily.
Yay, Lily!
I think